quote, "When we get the final numbers, they will be more than we can bear." He said it's horrendous, the number of lives lost. For example, 300 policemen, perhaps even more, are missing and feared lost in the collapse of the towers.
Garrick, if I can, let me interrupt you. This is Jim Clancy. Let me just interrupt you for a minute, because we have a new piece of footage that has come in that gives us another perspective, yet another perspective of the tragedy as it was literally unfolding this day, showing that second plane from a different angle as it slammed into the
something to say.
All right, they were rewinding the tape there, but an incredible angle showing that plane as it came in very low. You could see how low it was. Apparently they're from Battery Park. Taking a look. Can we roll it again, please?
We've seen it from the front angle before, but not from this angle.
Garrick Utley, I want to ask you something. As we look at these pictures, and we've looked at these pictures over and over again, and it affects not just the people that are in the United States that have been there in New York, but literally all around the world. Buildings, yes, they can be rebuilt, but there seems to be something in the psyche that may have been changed by the events of this day, such as the magnitude of what we've witnessed.
There's no question about this, Jim. Whether you're here in Manhattan and saw that as an eyewitness, or whether you're on the opposite side of this world watching it via satellite at this moment, they're never the same pictures. Each one is this new experience again, whether we're just seeing the same picture 2 or 3 times or something new like that. And I'm sure more pictures and images will be coming from various sources in the hours and the days to come. What really strikes you, though, and I think strikes any journalist or any person down on the street, is not just what we saw with that plane going into that tower and the horror of it, but trying to think, each of us throughout this day, what were the people in that plane going through? Who was in that tower where those flames and smoke are right now, having their morning coffee in a styrofoam cup, looking out across beautiful New York Harbor on a cloudless day and seeing this jet? Nothing more to say, just watch. Nothing more to say, except just one detail, which I think has been reported, but I might offer some clarity, Jim and Colleen. That was the second plane that struck the towers. It came from the south over New York Harbor, which is the normal direction the planes approach for landings at LaGuardia Airport. Planes coming into Kennedy don't fly over Manhattan. Planes coming into LaGuardia do fly up the Hudson River on this side or the East River on that side. So a plane coming from the south, you'd say he's off course, but that's the way planes do make their approach. But that first plane at 8:45 this morning, it came from the other direction. It was going up a one-way street, so to speak. It came from the north, which is here, straight down over the center of Manhattan into that tower. We saw that image just a few minutes ago. So it was going against traffic. Everybody who looked up and caught a glimpse of that plane flying at hundreds of miles an hour in Manhattan knew instantly something was wrong. That plane had no business being there, but it was, and that's the result.
Garrick, as awful and as horrendous as what this country has seen, what the world has seen already today, I suppose come daylight tomorrow, when day starts breaking behind you there, it starts to get really grim, doesn't it? Because people may get a better sense of the devastation, a better sense of the toll in terms of human life.
Well, we don't know when officials will start to make any kind of an estimate on how many lives have been lost. The search, of course, will begin. It's going to be long and arduous because we've seen how much rubble is down there, and nobody's even guessing how long it'll take to go through the rubble. One way of approaching a figure of human loss will be by taking a survey or an inventory, a census, if you will. Each company, each floor had offices, companies, people working there. They know how many employees were there. They know who didn't come home. That's the kind of statistics, the numbers, the body count, sad to say, that'll be made starting tomorrow morning. Back to you.
Garrick Utley, thanks.
Thanks for that, Garrick. Well, of course, President Bush was in Florida at the time of the attacks. For security reasons, he did not return to Washington, at least at first. Instead, Air Force One flew to an Air Force base in Louisiana and then on to another in Nebraska. Then at dusk, the president finally returned to Washington, his plane accompanied by jet fighters. At the White House, he addressed a nation traumatized by a day of tragedy.
Good evening. Today, our fellow citizens, our way of life, our very freedom came under attack in a series of deliberate and deadly terrorist acts. The victims were in airplanes or in their offices. Secretaries, businessmen and women, military and federal workers, moms and dads, friends and neighbors. Thousands of lives were suddenly ended by evil, despicable acts of terror.
This has undoubtedly been the toughest day of the administration of George W. Bush, without question. John King has been there at the White House throughout the day. He joins us now. John.
Well, Jim, President Bush at sleep tonight. At least the White House lights have been turned off, but we are told to look first thing in the morning for more efforts at sending reassuring signs from the president to the American people. He will bring a bipartisan group of the leadership of Congress to the White House and make another public statement. The president, immediately after he finished that televised address to the American people tonight, convened a meeting of the National Security Council, getting an update on U.S. troop deployments, getting an update on what the government knows about these terrorist strikes today. Also included in that meeting, an extraordinary meeting because of the extraordinary circumstances here today, the Transportation Secretary, the Health and Human Services Secretary, the Director of the Federal Emergency Management Agency. They are now directing the government's response. Portable morgue sent up to the streets of New York, a grim sign there. Deployment by the thousands of search and rescue teams, medical personnel around the country. The administration, on the one hand, reacting to these tragedies today by sending out emergency help. On the other hand, trying to look ahead. We are told by sources that senior administration officials have told key members of Congress that they are confident that they are developing evidence linking these attacks to organizations and people associated with the suspected terrorist Osama bin Laden. Publicly, the administration not saying that. This from private briefings to key members of Congress. But we do know in the president's remarks tonight to the American people, he said that the administration would not differentiate at all between terrorists and those who gave them harbor. The president will meet with his national security team again tomorrow. Secretary of State Powell out in public again in the morning as the administration, on the one hand, responds to this, and on the other hand, tries to decide what to do about it. Jim?
John King, as the investigation moves forward, and we know that's got to take its course, but when Americans wake up in the morning, will something have changed? Will they see a difference?
The White House certainly believes so. One of the reasons the president wanted to get back to the White House tonight, despite the security concerns, was to give a reassuring address to the American people, and certainly the symbolism of the president returning to Washington was important to the White House. Any Americans, we are told as of right now, the plan is to reopen the domestic commercial air system in the United States at noon tomorrow. But any American going to an airport in this country, to a major train station in this country, will see heightened security, no more checking your luggage at the curbside, a luxury enjoyed at most American airports. We are told there will be more random searches, more security personnel. The question is whether this is a permanent change of culture here or one that will fade in the weeks and months ahead. But certainly the country will awaken tomorrow still trying to count the numbers of those dead and injured, still trying to get an explanation from the president and other federal officials as to how this could have happened. 4 commercial airliners hijacked in the same day, what the administration is doing about it, the status of the investigation, and possible retaliation. Jim?
John, we saw earlier in the day the concerns for the safety of the president. Are those concerns going to remain in place?
Certainly, we are seeing on the streets of Washington, around the White House complex, extraordinary security measures taken. I was told by 2 senior officials earlier that there was a paramount concern of getting the president back to Washington because of the important political symbol that would send. But, as you mentioned, the president went first from Florida to a military base in Louisiana. At that point, there were plans to bring him back to Washington, but the White House was told that not all planes in the skies over the United States has been accounted for, I'm told by sources. At that point, the decision was made not to bring the president back to Washington until all the airliners known to be in the air over the United States were accounted for. It was only then, and then only after they rechecked the White House grounds, rechecked the security of Andrews Air Force Base, and arranged for that extraordinarily close contact fighter escort we just showed our viewers on television there, only then did they decide to bring the president back to Washington.
All right, John King reporting there live from the White House. Colleen?
All right, Jim, thanks. Let me get some phone numbers to you now. We want to make sure you get these. Airlines have released numbers for people who are concerned about their family members. Relatives of American Airlines passengers seeking information about relatives have this number to call, 1-800-245, 0999. United Airlines says that friends or family members seeking information on flights may call 1-800-932-8555. United also says that it's going to post information on its website. That's www.united.com. Now, the U.S. Justice Department has set up a hotline for families and relatives of those who may have been hurt or killed in these attacks. They're encouraged to call 800-331-0075. Relatives can get information about victims as well as provide authorities with information if they want to. The hotline will also inform survivors of their rights and some of the services that are going to be available to them. The Pentagon also operating a hotline for staff to ring in and register their status. All Army personnel who work at the Pentagon are asked to call 800-984-8523 or 703-428-0002. Now, families seeking information on Army personnel are also asked to call that same number. The number for Navy and Marine Corps personnel, 1-877-633-6772. Jim?
There are many people, of course, that are still missing, still unaccounted for, and there are people doing their best to try to locate them, hoping against hope, perhaps, that some are still alive. Deborah Farrick is on the scene. She's about 20 blocks from the actual battery park, the area of the Twin Trade Towers where they used to appear on the skyline there. Let's join her now by telephone. Deborah?
Well, Jim, I just spoke to a retired police officer who was at the actual site of the explosion. He was there with his cadaver dog. He said that after about 5 minutes, the dog couldn't smell anything because the dust is so thick down there. But the way that the officer described the scene, he said that there are big cranes lifting very heavy beams as they sort through some of this debris. There are people from Emergency Services Unit and the fire department. They are using heavy saws to try to cut through whatever they can, trying to find pockets of people who may still be alive. Now, that whole area down by the Trade Center is in total blackout. There are no lights, and it is normally one of the brightest areas of the city, but that is now in total blackout. And one police officer told me that as you get close to the scene, apparently it is lit up like a stadium because they have brought in all of these very powerful floodlights. And as a matter of fact, we saw, I would say, about 20 trucks, flatbed trucks, carrying some of those lights down just about 10 minutes ago. Again, police officers, firefighters, sorting through the debris. They're trying to find anybody who may still be alive in the rubble. They're lifting beams. They are going through whatever they can. But again, the dogs that they had brought down there to try to find people are effectively useless because it is so difficult to breathe down there. Jim?
All right, Deborah Farrick, our thanks to you for bringing us up to date. The scene as it continues to develop right down there at the World Trade Center location. Colleen?
All right, Jim. Well, U.S. officials regard Osama bin Laden as a prime suspect in the attacks against Washington and New York. He's believed to be in Afghanistan, and early on Wednesday morning local time, news of explosions in the Afghan capital, Kabul. Soldiers from the ruling Taliban say the explosions seem to come from a low-flying helicopter firing rockets. The United States swiftly denied any involvement, and CNN's Nick Robertson, who was in Kabul, reported that a rebel group had claimed responsibility for the attacks. A spokesman for the Taliban government denied that his country allowed bin Laden to strike from its territory.
We in Afghanistan do not allow Osama bin Laden to use Afghanistan's territory to launch attacks against any country around the world. We took away all communication devices from him, and he does not have any communication with anybody outside of Afghanistan. In any case, we will conduct our own investigation and find out what happened, and we denounce this terrorist attack, whoever is behind it.
And while denouncing the attack, the ruling Taliban say that they're going to conduct their own investigation. Now, Osama bin Laden, number one on the FBI's most wanted list. There's a $5 million bounty on his head, as we mentioned, believed to be hiding in Afghanistan. And for more on Osama bin Laden, let's go to Jean Meserve, who is in Washington right now. Jean?